Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth. Christmas Eve settled over the city like a carefully staged performance, glowing with golden lights, polished windows, and music that promised warmth it did not always deliver. Inside the Cole residence, luxury filled every corner, from the towering tree decorated in imported ornaments to the long dining table set for a picture-perfect holiday. Ethan Cole moved through the room with practiced confidence, his tailored suit flawless, his smile sharp and controlled. To outsiders, he looked like a man who had everything: success, wealth, and a beautiful family. What no one saw was how carefully that image was maintained, or how easily it could shatter. Clara stood near the window, one hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly, the other lightly touching the glass chilled by winter air. Her face was soft, her movements slow, shaped by the weight of both child and unspoken sadness. She listened to the laughter drifting from the living room and felt strangely apart from it, as though she were watching someone else's celebration. Ethan barely met her eyes, his words polite but distant, his affection reduced to gestures performed for appearance rather than love. Each smile he offered felt rehearsed, empty, and brief. From the opposite side of the room, Lena observed everything with calculated interest. Her red dress shimmered beneath the lights, bold and unapologetic, her presence too intimate for a family gathering yet boldly unchallenged. She leaned close to Ethan whenever she could, her laughter louder, her touch lingering just long enough to send a message. Lena thrived on control and impatience. Christmas, to her, was not about peace or family, it was a deadline. She wanted answers, decisions, and proof that she mattered more than the woman carrying his child. As carols played softly in the background, tension threaded itself through the evening. Clara sensed whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room, glances exchanged behind her back, and a coldness that no amount of festive warmth could melt. Ethan felt cornered by expectations he no longer wanted, torn between the responsibility he resented and the desire he refused to hide. Lena pressed closer, demanding clarity, daring him to choose. Beneath the glitter and lights, something fragile was already breaking, and none of them truly understood how close they were to losing everything. The door to the bedroom closed softly behind Clara, muting the distant sounds of laughter and music from downstairs. The silence pressed in on her, heavy and intimate, giving space for the pain she had been holding back all evening. She lowered herself onto the edge of the bed with careful movements, her back aching, her feet swollen, her body constantly reminding her of the life growing inside her. One hand rested on her belly as a habit, a quiet reassurance, while the other wiped away tears she no longer bothered to stop. Pregnancy had made everything more intense, the physical discomfort, the exhaustion, and most of all the loneliness. Nights that once ended with Ethan's arms around her now ended with excuses about work, phone calls taken in other rooms, and a growing distance she could not cross. She remembered how different he used to be, how he once spoke to her with warmth, how his hands lingered without impatience. After she told him she was pregnant, something in him shifted. His smiles became rare, his temper shorter, his presence unreliable. Affection turned into obligation, and obligation slowly faded into neglect. Clara lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling as memories replayed without mercy. She remembered asking him once if everything was okay, if she had done something wrong. He had laughed it off, kissed her forehead, and blamed stress. That word had become his shield: stress from work, stress from responsibility, stress from expectations. Each excuse carved a little more space between them, leaving Clara to fill the silence with hope that things would improve. Her breath caught when a recent memory surfaced, sharper than the rest. Standing in the hallway earlier that evening, she had overheard Ethan speaking in a low voice, thinking himself unheard. The tenderness in his tone had not been meant for her. He had spoken another woman's name, promised time, reassured her with words he had not offered Clara in months. Clara had stood frozen, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give her away. In that moment, doubt died, replaced by a quiet, devastating certainty. The realization did not break her all at once. It settled slowly, like a cold weight in her chest. She felt disbelief first, then a deep, aching sadness that drained her strength. Yet even in that pain, her thoughts turned to her child. She pressed her palm gently against her stomach, whispering reassurances meant as much for herself as for the baby. Whatever happened, she promised silently, this child would be protected. Clara did not scream, did not confront, did not collapse. She cried quietly, enduring the hurt with a strength no one had noticed. In the stillness of that room, she began to understand that survival did not always mean fighting loudly. Sometimes, it meant enduring in silence and preparing for what must come next. Lena watched the house glow with festive lights and felt nothing but impatience. Christmas meant endings to her, not beginnings. She had waited long enough, hidden in shadows, introduced as a friend, tolerated in silence while another woman carried the title of wife. Tonight, she wanted certainty. She wanted Ethan to finally choose. The confidence in her posture masked the simmering jealousy that had grown sharper with every passing week of Clara's pregnancy. She found Ethan alone near the kitchen, his attention split between his phone and the careful image he maintained. Lena stepped close, her voice low but firm, cutting through his hesitation. She told him she was tired of pretending, tired of waiting for stolen moments and empty promises. Her words were sharp, calculated to wound and pressure at the same time. When she spoke of Clara, there was no sympathy in her tone, only disdain. She mocked the pregnancy openly, calling it inconvenient, a chain tying Ethan to a life he clearly resented. To Lena, Clara was not a woman or a wife, but an obstacle. In her mind, the outcome was already decided. Ethan had given her expensive gifts, whispered plans of a future, and shared frustrations he never voiced at home. Financially, she felt secure. Emotionally, she believed she had replaced Clara long ago. Romantically, she was certain she held his desire. All that remained was for him to say it out loud. She pressed him harder, reminding him that Christmas was about honesty, daring him to prove she mattered more than appearances. Ethan hesitated only briefly. The fear of scandal flickered across his face, but it was quickly overtaken by desire and resentment. Responsibility weighed on him like a burden he no longer wanted to carry. Instead of confronting his conscience, he chose the easier cruelty. He nodded, agreeing with Lena's words, allowing himself to believe that Clara's pain was unavoidable and temporary. In that moment, he convinced himself he deserved happiness, no matter the cost. They leaned close, speaking in hushed tones, planning a private Christmas getaway meant only for the two of them. Some were quiet, some were indulgent, far from expectations and guilt. Clara was deliberately excluded from every detail, dismissed without a second thought. Lena laughed softly, triumphant, as Ethan smiled in a way he no longer did at home. Their intimacy felt electric, fed by secrecy and shared betrayal. Downstairs, laughter rang out while upstairs, silence waited. Lena basked in the contrast, unaware or uncaring that her victory was built on another woman's isolation. In the warmth of their closeness, betrayal reached its peak, wrapped neatly in holiday lights and false joy. Christmas morning arrived quietly, sunlight slipping through the curtains and settling over the decorations like an unwelcome witness. The house, so carefully prepared for celebration, felt strangely hollow. Ethan woke later than usual, irritation already forming as he noticed Clara wasn't beside him. He assumed she had gone downstairs early, perhaps sulking, perhaps trying to make a point. Her absence barely registered as concern. He dressed slowly, confident that whatever this was, it would pass like her silence always did. When he reached the living room, the stillness unsettled him. The tree lights were still on from the night before, gifts untouched beneath it. The kitchen was spotless, too spotless for Christmas morning. Ethan called her name once, then again, his voice echoing without answer. He noticed her phone lying on the counter, screen dark, exactly where she usually charged it overnight. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He muttered to himself that she must be trying to provoke guilt, another dramatic gesture meant to pull him back. Minutes stretched into an hour. Clara did not return. Her coat still hung neatly by the door, her shoes aligned the way she always kept them. Ethan checked the guest room, the bathroom, the backyard, irritation slowly giving way to confusion. He told himself she had gone for a walk, needed air, needed space. Yet unease crept in, cold and persistent, when he realized she hadn't taken anything with her. No purse. No keys. No phone. By midday, arrogance dissolved into fear. Ethan's hands trembled as he dialed her number, hearing it ring uselessly on the counter. He searched the house again, this time frantic, opening doors too hard, calling her name too loudly. Lena arrived, already irritated, complaining about delays and ruined plans. When she saw Ethan's expression, her annoyance faltered, replaced by sharp unease. She scoffed at first, accusing Clara of overreacting, insisting she would return once she felt satisfied she'd caused enough trouble. But Clara did not return. As hours passed, panic filled every corner of the house. Ethan called friends, then neighbors, then finally the police. Officers walked through the once festive rooms, their presence stripping the holiday illusion away. Questions were asked. Notes were taken. The home transformed into something unfamiliar, touched by suspicion and dread. Christmas decorations suddenly felt grotesque, mocking the seriousness of the situation. Outside, neighbors gathered, whispering behind gloved hands. Words spread quickly, a pregnant woman missing on Christmas morning was not something people ignored. By evening, local reporters lingered at the end of the driveway. Cameras appeared. Headlines formed before answers did. Ethan stood stiffly before flashing lights, his carefully built image beginning to fracture under scrutiny. Every detail mattered now, every inconsistency noted. Lena hovered nearby, arms crossed, irritation masking fear. She complained about inconvenience, about attention, about how everything was being blown out of proportion. Yet beneath her sharp words, unease pulsed. Something had shifted beyond her control. As night fell, one truth settled heavily over everyone involved, impossible to deny. Clara was gone. Not stormed off. Not hiding. Gone without a trace. And for the first time, the silence she left behind felt terrifyingly permanent. The days following Clara's disappearance blurred together, heavy with tension and fear. What began as concern quickly hardened into suspicion as detectives returned again and again, their questions sharper each time. Ethan sat across from them in rooms that felt smaller with every visit, his answers measured, his confidence unraveling. They asked about arguments, about his whereabouts, about the strain in his marriage. They scrolled through his phone, uncovering deleted messages, unexplained calls, and conversations that painted a picture he could no longer control. Financial records were examined next, revealing unusual expenses, hotel bookings, and gifts that had nothing to do with Christmas or family. With each discovery, the air around Ethan thickened. He felt watched even when he was alone, every sound in the house making his heart race. Sleep became impossible. When exhaustion finally claimed him, his dreams turned cruel. He saw Clara standing in the doorway, her eyes filled with tears, her hand pressed against her belly as she whispered his name. In the dreams, she asked why he hadn't protected her, why he hadn't listened. Ethan woke drenched in sweat, the echo of her voice lingering long after dawn. Guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. Memories he once ignored now replayed without mercy, Clara's silence at dinner, the way she flinched when he raised his voice, the sadness she carried so quietly he had mistaken it for weakness. He wondered if she had needed help, if his cruelty had pushed her somewhere dangerous. The thought that something irreversible might have happened tightened around his chest, making it hard to breathe. Lena, sensing the shift in public attention, began to pull away. Her calls became shorter, her visits rare. She complained about the stress, about how the situation was damaging her image. When detectives asked about her involvement, fear crept into her eyes. She insisted on distance, telling Ethan they needed to be careful, that being seen together would only make things worse. The warmth she once showed him cooled into irritation and avoidance. The affair, once thrilling, now felt like a liability she wanted to escape. Outside the house, public opinion shifted rapidly. News stories no longer questioned Clara's motives, they mourned her absence. Photos of her pregnant silhouette filled screens, accompanied by words like vulnerable and abandoned. Sympathy poured in from strangers who had never known her but felt connected to her story. Ethan watched his reputation crumble, his name increasingly paired with doubt and accusation. Business partners grew distant. Friends stopped calling. Alone in the quiet house, Ethan finally understood the cost of his choices. He stood to lose everything he had built, his status, his career, his freedom. Worst of all was the realization that he might lose his child without ever having the chance to make things right. As the walls closed in, one truth became unavoidable: the life he had taken for granted was already slipping through his fingers. Just as the investigation began to stall and exhaustion settled over everyone involved, a detail emerged that shifted everything. It started quietly, almost insignificantly, with a sealed envelope delivered to the detective in charge. Inside were documents Clara herself had prepared weeks before her disappearance. Bank statements, legal correspondence, and copies of identification papers pointed to accounts and assets far beyond what anyone believed she possessed. The name attached to them was Clara's, but the financial scale was staggering. The fragile image the public had embraced no longer fit. As detectives dug deeper, the truth unfolded layer by layer. Clara had not simply vanished in fear or desperation. She had planned her exit carefully, patiently, while enduring months of emotional neglect and betrayal. Phone records revealed calls she had made to private numbers traced to a powerful family known for keeping a low public profile. That family, it turned out, was hers. Clara had deliberately concealed her background when she married Ethan, choosing a quieter life and independence rather than privilege. She had wanted love without influence, respect without wealth. What she received instead was cruelty. Investigators learned that Clara's family had become aware of her situation shortly before Christmas. Recordings she left behind confirmed it. In one, her voice was calm but firm as she described Ethan's emotional abuse, the humiliation, and the affair he no longer bothered to hide. Another recording captured Lena's mocking words, secretly recorded during a confrontation Clara had endured in silence. Each piece of evidence was precise, undeniable, and devastating. On Christmas morning, while Ethan slept and Lena planned her escape, Clara was not alone. A discreet security team arranged by her family arrived before dawn. They moved efficiently, leaving no signs of struggle or haste. Clara left behind only what she wanted found. Her phone, carefully placed. Her coat, untouched. The scene was designed to provoke panic, not pity. She was escorted somewhere safe, where doctors, lawyers, and family surrounded her with protection she had denied herself for too long. The final blow came in the form of a letter addressed to Ethan and delivered through legal channels. In it, Clara explained everything with clarity and restraint. She wrote about the woman she had been when she married him, hopeful and trusting. She wrote about the loneliness of carrying a child while being treated as an inconvenience. She acknowledged the pain but refused to beg or accuse emotionally. Instead, she laid out facts, evidence, and consequences. She made it clear that she had chosen to leave not because she was weak, but because she refused to let her child be raised in an environment built on lies. When the contents became known, public perception shifted overnight. The narrative of a helpless, abandoned wife collapsed. In its place stood a woman revealed to be intelligent, strategic, and quietly powerful. Clara had endured in silence not because she had no options, but because she was preparing the right moment to protect herself and her unborn child completely. Ethan read the letter alone, his hands shaking, realization crushing his chest. Everything he believed about control and power dissolved. He had underestimated the woman he betrayed, mistaking patience for submission. Lena's name appeared throughout the evidence, her words preserved without mercy. There was no escape from it now. The disappearance that once seemed tragic now revealed itself as deliberate and decisive. Clara had not vanished into weakness. She had stepped into safety, surrounded by people who valued her, leaving behind a truth no one had expected and a reckoning no one could stop. The release of Clara's evidence hit with the force of a public reckoning. Documents, recordings, and legal filings became accessible almost overnight, and the story transformed from speculation into undeniable truth. News outlets dissected every detail, replaying Clara's calm voice and exposing months of deceit. Ethan's carefully polished image shattered under the weight of proof. Business partners acted swiftly, distancing themselves to protect their own reputations. Contracts were suspended, then cancelled outright. Meetings were called off, investments withdrawn, and the company he had built on confidence and appearances began to collapse from the inside out. Ethan watched the fallout in disbelief, refreshing news pages and emails that brought only rejection. Calls went unanswered. Statements of support vanished. The authority he once carried meant nothing now. Every success he had claimed as his own was re-examined, and people began to realize how much of his stability had quietly rested on Clara's presence, her patience, and her sacrifices. Without her, everything unraveled. Lena fared no better. The recordings stripped away her charm and excuses, revealing calculated cruelty and ambition. She was labeled exactly what she feared most, a gold digger who mocked a pregnant woman while pursuing luxury and status. Social invitations disappeared. Friends distanced themselves publicly. Online criticism followed her everywhere, relentless and unforgiving. She turned to Ethan for reassurance, but found only resentment and blame. He cut ties with her abruptly, eager to shed any connection that worsened his situation. The intimacy they once shared dissolved into bitterness and mutual accusation. Legal consequences followed swiftly. Divorce proceedings began with terms heavily favoring Clara, supported by her family's influence and irrefutable evidence. Financial losses mounted as settlements, penalties, and frozen assets drained what remained of Ethan's fortune. Investigators reopened aspects of the case, examining whether emotional abuse, manipulation, or coercion crossed into criminal territory. Each summons, each notice, reinforced the reality that there would be no easy escape. Alone in the now empty house, Ethan finally understood the scale of his loss. Clara had not merely been his wife, she had been the quiet foundation beneath his life, the stability he ignored and the strength he dismissed. He remembered the Christmas lights she had chosen, the traditions she maintained, the warmth she created without recognition. Now, every December reminder felt like punishment. Christmas, once a symbol of success and celebration, became something else entirely. It marked the moment his lies were exposed, his arrogance dismantled, and his world undone. While Clara moved forward in safety and dignity, Ethan remained trapped in the ruins of his own making, forced to face the truth far too late. Months later, Clara stood in the sunlight streaming through the large windows of her new home, the soft hum of life surrounding her like a protective cocoon. Her face glowed with serenity, the kind that comes from having endured storms and emerged intact. In her arms rested her newborn child, a tiny being whose presence made every past hardship feel purposeful. She traced delicate fingers over the baby's cheek, whispering promises of love, safety, and a future shaped by her own choices. Every heartbeat reminded her of resilience, every gentle coo a testament to survival. Her life had shifted dramatically, yet gracefully. Clara had reclaimed her identity, no longer defined by a husband's cruelty or a mistress's ambition. She pursued her passions, rebuilt relationships, and surrounded herself with people who valued her strength, intellect, and compassion. The luxury and attention she had once ignored now existed on her own terms, as symbols of autonomy rather than entrapment. Justice had been served not through vengeance but through the undeniable consequences faced by those who betrayed her. Ethan watched from a distance, powerless, his presence in her life reduced to a memory of regret. He had lost everything: status, wealth, reputation, and the family he once took for granted. Lena, too, had vanished from the narrative, dismissed by society and time as a cautionary footnote. Their importance faded, leaving Clara's story unchallenged and complete. The final scene radiated quiet triumph. Clara, once underestimated and confined by circumstance, now stood as the embodiment of perseverance. She had not merely disappeared, she had risen. Every choice she made, every step forward, reflected the strength she had cultivated in silence. In the warmth of the morning light, holding her child close, Clara's life affirmed a truth that resonated far beyond her own experience: the woman they tried to suppress had survived, thrived, and redefined her world. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth.